This is Cyber Chronicles. I am Nate.
And I'm Landon.
Join us as we dive into the world of tech and IT. At Cyber Chronicles, we bring a diverse range of guests with unique insights, perspectives, and professions to share their thoughts and opinions on various topics. Stay with us to gain insights and knowledge as we explore the world of cyber.
All right, welcome back, welcome in. If you're new to Cyber Chronicles, today we are stoked for this episode. We are joined with Jason Haddix. Welcome in, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just a quick intro from us. If you've listened before, I'm sure you've already heard this a million times. I'm Landon, co-host of Cyber Chronicles, alongside Nate, cybersecurity researcher, mainly focused on the offensive side of security. I'm pursuing a degree in cyber, but I'm definitely keen on improving in more ways than just through school. And one of those ways of improving was why we started this podcast, to learn and bring different guests with a variety of skill sets to all those who are listening, so that everyone can learn.
And I'm Nate. I'm the other co-host of Cyber Chronicles. I just finished my associate's degree in both IT cybersecurity along with networking. I also recently just landed a job as an IT support, furthering increased my knowledge and skills in the industry. Jason, would you mind giving us a little bit introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jason Haddix. I've been working in IT and cybersecurity for about 22 years now. I started off just doing IT like everybody else, help desk support, and then into desktop support and server support. And then I had a brief stint on the dark web where I was part of a dark web forum that got shut down a long time ago, which was called Shadow Crew. That's kind of where I learned how to do web hacking a little bit. And so I spent a little bit of my youth probably being misspent in certain ways, making fake IDs and stuff like that. And then as soon as that got taken down, I went pretty much completely white hat straight, did everything, kind of by the book. And so took an associate's course actually that was called Ethical Hacking and Network Defense. And that was an amazing class because it just kind of told me that, hey, this is actually a job. You can do the hacking stuff as a job. So from then on, I was fully kind of focused on offensive security, so penetration testing and red teaming. Did that for a long time. Moved into web hacking, and then later on in my career, like really recently, I've been in a lot of leadership roles. I do a lot of conference talks about my methodology and kind of stuff I make and research. But I've been all over the place now. I've been a leader, I've been a blue teamer, a red teamer, you name it. But my heart has always been in offensive security.
Awesome. And it's crazy it's crazy when I found out, as well as telling other people, that hacking is actually a job. You can have a job cracking systems and it not be illegal, which is awesome. And you get
Yeah,
paid. So that's
yeah,
definitely a
it's
bonus.
a good job. Yeah,
Oh yeah. So
yeah,
backstory, just for all of those who are listening that don't know, there was some of us in the group that went, and so they know because they were with us at Hackspace. But we met at the con, Hackspace Con, down in Florida, and Nate and I both got to sit down in your talk, which was amazing, by the way. And we noticed highlighted in the first video of your talk that you are now representing yourself in your own company. How do you feel that talk went? And I kind of just want to get your opinion on Hackspace Con.
yeah. I love Talkspace Con. I love the venue. I love the people. That was my second one, so I think I'll be back to that as many times as possible. Florida is a little humid, so
Yeah.
that was crazy, but
Yeah.
but no, it was really fun. So I've been working for other people my whole life. I was part of HP, which is a really big corporate entity. I was part of a couple small consultancies, and then I went to and then I worked at a startup called Bug Crowd, which turned into a very big company over its tenure doing bug bounty stuff. And then I went to Ubisoft, which was a huge video game company, and I led their security team. And so I've always been working for other people. And what happened was I started this class called the Bug Hunters Methodology Live. And so it is really an intermediary class for offensive security people, right? So you have a lot of free classes and for paid classes that they'll take you from like, 0 to, maybe 30th or 40th percentile in kind of what you need to know to do the offensive security job. And you can probably get like an intro job with a lot of those things. My class address is kind of the probably 40th to 90th percentile, which is more intermediate class. It's basically all my tips and tricks in hacking rolled into a 2-day training. My resources that I use, my bookmarks, my tips and tricks, and stuff like that. So that class I ran while I was still full-time employed at my last employer, and it sold crazily. And so what I did was I sat down with my wife Julia, and she ran the numbers. She's been in finance before, and she ran the numbers, and we just figured out, hey, like if I wanted to be a full-time trainer, and just do like consulting as well, and like kind of hacking on the side, with bug bounty, like I could probably make more than I was, just as an employee of other places. That's what we did. So we started a company called Arcanum Information Security, which the name is based off of a fantasy book that Julie and I both love. It's called Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and the Arcanum in that book is the School of Magic. And so we have 2 trainings out right now. One is the Bug Hunters Methodology Live, which is the hacking one, and then we have another one called Red, Blue, Purple AI. And so for that course, I do conference talks on little pieces of it, micro pieces of it. And so the one you guys saw at Hack SpaceCon was actually the beta version of some of that content, and I thought it went really well. I thought that I got a lot of people come up after, and like I think what's happening right now in the industry is that you're seeing a lot of talks about AI, but a lot of them are just BS, right? There's like no practical usage
Yeah,
in those talks.
very
And so
broad.
that my talk, yeah, very broad. And so my talks are very practical to bring generative AI and LLM usage to security people. So I think it went really well.
Yeah. And so you went kind of could definitely do a lot better, could start my own company. Was what all went into Arcanum? What was there any nitty-gritty details that just really stand out?
You know, starting your own company is not as hard as you would think to start it, right? I mean, basically all you need is an LLC registered in whatever state that you're in. Um, and then like we wanted to separate the finances, so we got a business card under that LLC, and then I mean, at that point you're a business, like you're a registered business, and then like in order to make your business successful, then there's a lot of other stuff that goes around. But just like to start a business is not like hard. But I mean, I have always built really good teams. Like at HP, I built a 200-person offensive security team that tests different types of stuff. So web, mobile apps, network, source code review. I built that team at HP with my friend Daniel Miesler. So that was uh, it's always been in my blood. Everywhere I went to build really good teams, and so now, at my own company, it's me, but I will also, over the course of the next year, get to build out a team again, and it's my team, right? I can run it the way I want. I can do I can run this company the way I want. There's a lot of minutia when you're working for a bigger company where, like, let's say I wanted to do some cool kind of guerrilla marketing thing tomorrow. Like, I want to give away a flipper for some CTF design. Like, I make a quick CTF, I want to put it on Twitter, and like, I want to give away a flipper to the winner, right? Well, like in a big organization, like that's a big thing, and it takes a lot of work to get something like that done, even though it's small, right? Like, and you have to get it approved by the marketing department. You have to get it approved by like like your boss or whatever. My own company, I can just do that. Like, and I enjoy the fast pacedness and like the quick iteration of being my own boss. It is also very stressful. Like, it is also like
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of work, right? So I am marketing, I am sales. It's just me and Julia and one other person right now, my wife, and one other contractor that we use. And running your own business is a lot. You don't think about how much goes into a lot of this stuff. Like, even going to a conference, there's a lot of work that goes into getting the swag printed and getting like getting everything set up for the table, and then running the table while you're giving a talk, while you're talking to people.
Oh
You're kind of
yeah.
exhausted at the end of it. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you can also I would argue that in a quicker, you said fast pace, but like a quicker you can see the change a lot more at a smaller company.
Yeah, I mean, here's an example, right? So for DEF CON, like I have been to every DEF CON since DEF CON 14, right? So a lot of DEF CONs, except for the one where they it was during COVID. And I've seen what works and what doesn't work for like marketing a cybersecurity company at DEF CON, right? I've just either experienced it or have been part of it or, whatever, right? And so one of the things that is really popular at DEF CON is badge life, right? Like printed circuit board badges, and hackers love this thing. I love it, right? They are cool badge types. They have blinky lights, and then you can take them home and like mount them on your wall. And so PCB badges are, or badge life is a really big part of the con. So, for us at Arcanum, we're building an Arcanum PCB badge, and like really all I have to do is just like source it from the vendor, tell them what I want, and like print it, and then we're just gonna like guerrilla market style tweet out, where we'll be with the badges at certain points, and like give them away, and like something like that would have, it would have taken like 5 people and like 8 conference calls, and oh, like how are we converting this into leads? And like with a small business, I can just do it and feel good about, kind of the buzz that we're generating with it, and that's kind of the investment. And so I like that quickness about it.
Yeah. And hey, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't been to any DEF CONs, which I'm sad to say, but I've also only recently got into it, cybersecurity as a whole. And I am planning, hopefully, to be able to go to as many cons as I can and just be able to learn and go there for the fun of it too. Isn't one of the DEF CONs or all of them have like a hackable thing to do with the badge?
Yeah, yeah. So in badge life, that is the sub kind of community that it's called. In badge life, you have different types of badge. So some conferences have the money to print PCB badges, but they're mostly just design and what we call blinky badges. And blinky badges just blink with LEDs, and that's cool. Like, and a lot of times that's just the budget that they have. And so, like that's still cool and you can put it on your wall, whatever. Other places like DEF CON, yes, they go super hard, and every badge is part of a larger challenge integrated into the con. And so DEF CON's probably one of the biggest ones, where I think the badge is integrated into what they call the mystery challenge at DEF CON, meaning that there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's like a giant scavenger hunt. Some of it is not technical, some of it is technical. And then the badge challenge part of it is like DEF CON makes different levels of badges at DEF CON, right? So if you're a DEF CON, goon, which is someone who's a volunteer, you have a certain badge. It's red. And then if you're a DEF CON vendor, you have a certain badge because you're in the vendor floor. And then if you're a DEF CON like CTF person, or I think there's like 5 different types of badges in total, one of being the regular one that everybody gets. And then like, in many past years, part of the puzzle was like they interacted with each other in a certain way. And so like you had to get all 5 badges, connect them, via soldering them together via the right, points, and then the software would then interact in a certain way, and then you had to solve some like crypto challenge or some exploitation challenge or whatever. Um, and like some of them have been done in really esoteric ways. One year we had a badge at DEF CON that was just a crystal slate. It was just like a circle of crystal with an LED behind it and an RFID like system. And like I think like there was like some Morse code involved in the way that the blinkies worked, and like you had to be near other certain types of badges. And yeah, so it's like kind of like if you've ever experienced an escape room, right? It's like that on a grand scale with these crazy badges. So it's super fun.
I had no idea it was that intricate. That is amazing.
Oh
Really
yeah.
cool.
And every year it's different too. So it's not like you can go in expecting knowing what to do too. Like one year part of the puzzle was like they laid out this giant floor sticker that was like the DEF CON logo. And everybody thought it was just like a piece of art or whatever, but around the corners of it there were like these glyphs, and you had to like translate these glyphs in order to unlock part of the puzzle. I mean, the stuff they think of for the puzzles is fantastic.
You're making me want to go to DEF CON even more.
Same here.
Yeah, yeah.
I was planning on it hopefully next year that I'll be able to get to go.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, when you guys get your first, employment, and this is for, I know a lot of people in, still coming up in the industry too, or, like it's one of the things you can ask for as a perk when you get hired, if you're in the position to ask for anything, is like, hey, I would really like to go to at least one conference a year to learn, and DEF CON is the one I want to go to. That's normally what I call table stakes for it's not a table stakes for entry level jobs because you don't have like a lot of leverage. But in mid level and high level jobs, right? Like if you're going into a job where they can't pay you a salary that, or maybe they're paying you a little bit under market for your job or whatever like that, and you know that, but you're still willing to work there, you can negotiate on other terms too, and you say, hey, like, instead of paying me like, I know the market for this, job is X, and we're a little bit below that. One of the things I'm willing to negotiate is if you can agree to send me to DEF CON, which means hotel for 4 days, and hotel food and the conference ticket, and so I can learn and keep my skills up. And so that's something I usually tell like younger people who are getting their second cybersecurity job or something like that, is like there's other things you can negotiate into your package other than your salary. And DEF CON is usually one that I absolutely negotiate into every job. I'm like, hey, I'm going to DEF CON and you guys are gonna have to pay for it because like this is my thing. So yeah.
That's a great way to. I've never thought about doing something like that. And you are learning. Like there is a learning aspect to it. It's fun too,
Oh
but
yeah,
you definitely get
yeah,
knowledge through it.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So
it's
is there
awesome.
any upcoming Arcanum, projects or anything that you could dish out? Obviously no leaking secrets here.
I mean, I've been brand building for my whole career. It's why I'm on the conference circuit and able to speak and stuff like that, because people know the research I do is usually good. Um and so all of that is poured into the hacking class that we have, and then the AI class was something that I really just caught the bug when GPT-3 came out, and have been researching practical ways to make better bots and prompt engineering tricks, and surrounding myself with other brilliant people who I can bounce these ideas off of. So those are the ones that exist right now. We are going to a few conferences. So obviously, DEF CON and Black Hat is our next big one, and we'll be there. And if anyone is there, we'll have swag to give away: shirts, T-shirts, badges, challenge coins. We got all kinds of stuff. So that's all in the works right now. But after that, we have a few conferences, but we are going to be working on a few new classes. So one of the classes that I'm going to do, and I think it's probably well pertainable to you guys, maybe your audience, is that like when Julie and I have been going to conferences as Arcanum for the last, I mean, we started in March. Um, so we've been to quite a few conferences. We've been on the road quite a lot. And when we get a table at a conference and we talk about our consulting services and our training, like I would say 50% of the people who come up to the table are students or people who are in IT who are trying to transition into offensive security, but a lot of students, a lot of graduate students, postgraduate students, doing whatever. And they always come up to the booth and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want to get into cybersecurity." And it's like, "Oh," and then I'm like, "Oh, cool. What type of cybersecurity? What field?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't really know. I just want to get into cybersecurity." And then I'm like, "Okay, well, like it's a really big field, like just getting into cybersecurity, like being a generalist, like kind of doesn't exist all the time at every company. So you really have to like figure out what you want to do." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, there's probably about 70 specific jobs that you can do inside of cybersecurity. Not all of them are technical. Some of them are technical. Some are offensive. Some are defensive. Some are like project management. Depending on what kind of company you go to. And even inside of those areas, there's sub skills inside of each of those areas. So if you go into offensive security and you want to test things, you want to be a hacker, right? Well, it's like penetration testing, and includes a whole bunch of types of assessment, right? Mobile assessment, web assessment, attacking networks and infrastructure, attacking cloud. And so I talk to a lot of students who come up to the booth and they just have no idea. And I don't know if it's if it's like a product of the university system really not training all the different jobs. They've usually heard about penetration testing because it's really sexy, or they've heard about like forensics or something like that. But those are just two jobs inside of cyber that you could specialize on. So I think one of the next classes that I'm going to do is a zero to hero, pay what you can cybersecurity course for new people, right? So all of my stuff so far has been pointed at the mid market or the advanced market for the AI stuff. This will be pointed at students I think it'll be like maybe like 20 or $50 at the very minimum, but then if you want to pay more for it, you pay what you can or something like that. And then we'll also give it away to a whole bunch of places too, I'm guessing. But it'll be pre-recorded, and I will go through every job that exists in cybersecurity and talk about what those people do day to day, how they fit into a security organization, what consulting is like, um, you know, also what open source and closed source tools those people use right now in 2024, what certificates there are available for those people that are free, which ones are the ones you want to get when you get some money to get past the HR and resume filter, and then a lot about building your resume and interviewing for your first few jobs, and figuring out what you want to specialize into. And so that's going to be the next class, I think.
That sounds really good because I can't imagine being on your side and somebody saying going through cybersecurity when that's kind of all encompassing. Because even if you go down a level and you say okay cloud, but then there's like how many jobs in cloud or how many jobs in offensive security, and so that would definitely be a class, and I would look into that for sure. Just deciding and knowing where you want to go as your path in cybersecurity.
Yeah. And there's a lot of tricks. Like, I mean, when you've been a hiring manager on the other side too, it's like, um, like a lot of people come out of whatever educational system they're in, or just like transitioning from one place to another. Security is not as focused on formal education than a lot of other fields. They're more focused on like practical knowledge, and a lot of times that is attained via self-study or certification or something like that. But it's not even really on certification these days. Like, I think one of the pieces of advice is I tell people is like, oh, they're like, well, can you look at my resume or like whatever, and so I coach a lot of people on resume building, and like whereas the structured education system will tell you to follow the curriculum vitae format, where it's just like a white paper and you keep it one page and you do these things and it's in this font, and like that's how businesses work. Really not how most modern businesses work. I actually prefer a resume with some design on it, and a lot of the times you're not going to have a lot of previous experience. And so, how do you build a portfolio of open source work and contribution to the community, and blogging and a little bit of brand building, and fill out your resume so that you can show that you have a passion for this thing? And so, those are things that I want to talk about in there too, because that'll be how you get your foot in the door is usually that section of your resume. So.
Yeah, you see those jobs on LinkedIn, the entry level job, but 15 years experience. And it's like, you definitely got to
Yeah.
build up some way of getting to that without just going straight into it and getting the
Yeah, and
experience.
it's easier than ever these days too, right? Like, I mean, there's so many free resources, there's free certificates. It's just hard to like find them all. And there's so many free trainings too, or like low cost trainings that you can do, and then it's all about how you write about that on your resume and your experience. And I talk to a lot of people about how a cybersecurity like person who's trying to get into their first or second role, your resume really feels more like an artist portfolio, right? Where you have a whole bunch of you have like a body of work that you're going to show people of things that you've done in the industry or in the community, because you don't have a lot of previous job experience for them to look at. And so I talk about it as like an artist portfolio where you're going to do a whole bunch of stuff on like Try Hack Me or Hack the Box or Tester Lab, or if you're doing blue team stuff, there's the equivalent of those, all kinds of places. And so, building that into your resume and telling a story around it is probably more valuable than anything else you can put on there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Hack the Box is just, I use it and as a way of practicing, also fun too. I do
Yeah.
definitely
Oh yeah.
enjoy.
Totally.
I just started offshore. I'm having a lot of fun because I feel like it's the most real realistic, not as CTF-y, even though it is CTF,
Mhm.
but it's definitely some experience without just doing it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure.
So, like, what's your learning methodology? Like, take us through when you don't know what to do. What do you do when you don't know what to do? I kind of
Oh,
want
that's
to.
a great question. That's actually a really, really good question. Um, okay, so let's say I get like, I mean, this has happened many, many times in my career, right? Like when you're a consultant and you work for like HP or some other consultancy or something like that, they're farming you out to other businesses, and so really there's some sales guy who's like, or sales guy or girl or person, and they're out there and they're like selling this project and they're selling you, and then eventually you get handed a project, and a lot of times everything will be fine, but there is like the 20% of the time where they've sold you into something that you have no idea how to test that technology, like some framework, or maybe they'll even sell you on a testing that you've never done before. I've definitely been put on like mainframe assessments and wireless assessments that were not standard, that I really had no experience in doing, or I'd be applied to a web app, which I have a lot of experience in doing, but I've never seen this tech stack before in my life. I mean, I'll start at the bottom level there. Like if I want to, like if I got to find like a web app technology that I've never seen before, like I mean, it's really just been Googling. Like I mean, like Googling is a core skill for security people, right? And I mean, the first thing I do is like I start looking at the docs for the software that I'm going to be up against. So if I want a web application assessment or web application pen test, like I'll identify the stack that I'm up against using some tools like Built With or Wapalizer or WhatWeb. These are all Chrome extensions that you can click when you when you land on a website, and they'll tell you what server-side technology they're using, what client-side technology they're using, what libraries they're importing, and stuff like that. And so that'll give me a first inkling of like, okay, what is the tech stack here? And then I'll start Googling pretty simple stuff. Like I'll start Googling the documentation and then looking at the security section of the documentation. And I'll be like, okay, so this is how this web application framework is trying to protect against these vulnerabilities, right? And since I've been in security a long time, I know the vulnerabilities I want to exploit, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, like stuff that's going to get me RCE or some really good bug or something like that, LFI. But there's also a lot of client side bugs that exist now in JavaScript frameworks, and so you got to really investigate. That's the first thing I do, is look at documentation and look and see how the frameworks and the technology addresses security vulnerabilities. How do they do input validation and how do they do output encoding? And that's one thing. The next thing I do is I just do a bunch of Googling on who else has pen tested this before, right? There's a vibrant conference community, of which HackSpaceCon is only one, but there's hundreds of security conferences, and there's even more small grassroots meetups and stuff like that. And so, invariably, with a new technology, someone will have already done a presentation somewhere. So I'll just Google and be like, okay, so let's say I've never had experience with um, like Laravel or something like that, like some framework, some web framework. I'll just go Google and I'll be like, okay, so Laravel pen testing, Laravel security presentation, and I'll go see who else has done some research here and try to read their research and see what they found. And that, with the Googling and the documentation, gives me a solid foundation to understand the application I'm looking at if it's not familiar. And so that's the start of kind of the learning journey. And I take notes in XMind, which is a mind mapping software. And so as I'm finding things I think are useful in all this research and Googling and stuff like that, like I have like a million open Chrome tabs, I will paste it in my mind map into my notes, and then that turns into me building a methodology. It's a very beta at this point, but a very beta methodology for pen testing that technology or assessing that technology. And then that's the foundation of it, and then you kind of move on from there.
Have you ever
Okay.
used AI when you get stuck? Have you ever taken advantage of AI in cybersecurity?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've built several bots that are generalist kind of partners in AI. So the one that is really popular is my Arcanum security bot, and it's it is a great like person to ask, or it is a great bot to ask, just general questions about security. Like, I mean, you have to realize that LLMs are built off of the totality of their data set, um, and the data set that like some of the companies who run the LLMs have will include like a whole corpus of security research that ended up on the web, because most of all they're pulling web data and stuff like that. So I mean, a lot of times in general, I can look at that stuff and be cool. But for when it comes to cutting edge things, um, it won't have anything in its kind of data that will help me. Like, so what I end up doing is then prompting it as a um, I prompt it as like an extension of like something it does know, right? So let's say I'm up against a new web framework and I'm using Arcanum cybersecurity bot, and I'm like, hey, I'll start a prompt with it, and I'll user conversation with it, and I'll be like, hey, I'm testing this new thing. It's a pretty new technology. I don't expect you to have. I mean, I'll tell it. I don't expect you to have much data on this in your context or in your data set, but it's very similar to this other thing. And I want to, it's very similar to this other web framework, and I want to start building like a pen testing methodology for this thing, and that'll give it a little bit of guidance, and then I'll talk about what bugs I want to look for, and then I can have a general conversation with it. It has helped me, build methodologies for new tech. You just have to like equate it to something that's similar, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using the bot. So I made a bot that was almost similar to what you were saying with a mind map. I just kind of took my own notes and then made those as the data sets. So what about you all? To all the listeners out there, do you use AI? If so, how do you integrate it into your day-to-day work? Whether it's enhancing your workflow or serving as a study companion, we'd love to hear all the innovative ways that you've utilized AI. Reach out or drop a comment and let us know.
I think a lot of the stuff I talked about in the talk, and I mean the new version of the talk is even better because I go through my methodology for building bots a little bit with all the prompt engineering that goes into them. But most of I mean, like most of what people need to understand is like when you're using a GPT or anything like that, um, you're asking the model a question, and then you can sprinkle on a little bit of like what you're doing is notes or extra context or directions, right? And there's only a couple places where you can put that stuff. You can upload it as a file using a kind of a RAG system, like a retrieval augmented generation system. And ChatGPT has that built in with the upload file kind of stuff. And so you can add your own notes, or you can add context to the bot via the system prompts. Or you can add it in a conversation as a user prompt. So the secret sauce to all the bots I make is really, really good system prompts where I add a whole bunch of context around what I want the bot to do, different tips and tricks like my notes that I, dump in there. And so I think that's what makes some of the current gen stuff that's in the GPT store really powerful is really, really good system prompting right now. Like if you look at some of the bots that are highest in their category in the GPT store, and then you jailbreak them and you look at their system prompts, they are sometimes up to 5-10 pages of text, the maximum you can put into ChatGPT for a system prompt in, guiding the bot on how to handle all these different situations, what kinds of things you want it to suggest, how much in depth you want it to go, how you want it to format its answer, and then that context and direction on top of its base data set that it's trained on, then it becomes super valuable. And so, getting context to, current Gen AI right now is really, really important.
What about your like nuclei, hash, Nessus, subdomain ninja? I know you brought those out in your talk. Are those also
Yeah,
ChatGPT bots or
yeah, they're
um
all they're all in the ChatGPT store. They should all be marked under my name. They're all open source now, so anybody can use them. The system prompts aren't available to anyone, but that's the magic behind all of those bots is really good system prompts. So like let's take the Nuclei bot, right? So if anybody hasn't heard of Nuclei, Nuclei is an open source vulnerability scanner. It's probably the one of the biggest advents in security tooling that we've had since Nmap, right? Because normally vulnerability scanning tools are for paid tools that you have to buy from big companies like Nessus and Qualys and like something like that, right? So Nuclei gives us a free open source vulnerability scanner that's contributed to by the community. So it's one of the best things that's ever happened to us. Now Nuclei writes its vulnerability checks that it runs in YAML, and their documentation is all over the internet. But we built a Nuclei bot where basically you can pass it an exploit or explain an exploit or something like that, and it'll build you a Nuclei template. And the secret sauce behind that is really in the system prompts that the user never sees. We talk about, the structure of a nuclei template. We give it 5 examples of different types of nuclei templates, how to factor it really well, and then how to take different types of exploits and how they match up to those templates. And so that's the system prompt that nobody ever sees behind the scenes that's helping the bot be better at writing those templates. And then so you can just pass it like a bug that comes out on Twitter tomorrow and be like, create me a nuclei template for this, and it'll create one for you, and you just drop it in your nuclei folder, and then you are able to vulnerability scan for that vulnerability, maybe even before some of the big companies have even made a check for it in Nessus or Qualys or something like that. And it didn't cost you any money; it cost you just a little bit of time. And this is a force multiplier for a lot of security teams, right? Because like a Nessus and a Qualys, those are $20,000 to $100,000 subscriptions a year. And imagine if you could not pay for that and instead invest it in your people, because you're using something like Nuclei to do your vulnerability scanning. So anyway, that's kind of my soapbox for those types of things.
I mean, it's a great way to think about it, because I've definitely I was shocked the first time I saw Nessus price and some of those prices out there of just, these closed source paid for tools, that it definitely takes quite a large company to efficiently pay for those.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think of those. A lot of people think of those as like table stakes. And what if they didn't have to be, right? What if we could hire one more person on the team instead to do stuff? Because like the bottleneck is usually headcount on a security team, and so it would, like if we could get to places where we didn't have so many of those 1Z, 2Z, 3Z kind of like subscriptions that were so expensive. Like I think that helps security relieve a lot of pressure on security teams in general.
How are companies getting away with, selling these vulnerability scans that some of these tools do as a penetration test?
Oh yeah, this is a big topic. So in the world, you have compliance and other forcing factors that force you to do security assessments. And for the longest time, the in the beginning of like when we were doing pen tests, it was just run some of these vulnerability scanners, find out which vulnerabilities had an exploit online, Google it, download it, compile it, shoot it at your customer, find a way in, and then they would pay you a check. And that was for the longest time how penetration testing worked. We got a lot of things that made that faster and quicker over the years, um, like Metasploit and other tooling. For a while it was Core Impact was the professional one, but that now it's kind of fallen off. But um, and so people got really used to that workflow of just like scan something, find an exploit. It was really easy to find the exploit, compile it, run it, and win in pen testing. But that is not how kind of it works anymore. If your penetration testers are just running Nessus for you, which you probably already have, on a license for your company, you're already scanning with Nessus, and then they're just turning that into a report. That is a low quality penetration test. It's not really a penetration test. It's more of a vulnerability scan. And that's okay, right? If that's what the client wants, like they understand what they're getting, that's cool. But it's not cool if a pen test company is saying, "Oh yeah, we're badass pen testers. We have a cool methodology like that we've homegrown, our own exploits. We do research for everything. We do all manual testing." And then on the back end of the company, they're giving that project to like a junior person, and they're just like, scan this with Nessus, and then we'll turn it into a report. And that is unfortunately a subsection of our industry that does exist right now. It's like sell the world, like do all the spin, and then like way under deliver, which sucks because there are lots of pen test companies out there who do all that stuff. They have a manual methodology. They will do some vulnerability scanning, but maybe they have their own vulnerability research team that does their own checks. They do manual web testing, and so you're really getting a lot of value out of like good pen testers. But like when you compare those two types of outfits, what happens is that like the one with the better marketing team wins. It's not necessarily the one with the better testing team wins. And so that's kind of where we are in the industry right now. Is there's a lot of these what people call pen test puppy mills, It's nothing to do with, like hating on new people, or juniors in the thing. It's just about, like if you're going to sell a hardcore pen test, you better be able to back it up with hardcore testing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
And it's honest, that can be dangerous in some cases too, depending on if it's a hospital or the nature of what you're testing. If you're severely under delivering just because you're running, one vulnerability, if it's essentially just a vulnerability scan and you're promising a penetration test, then you're not even finding, the vulnerabilities, or you're not doing the work, which could definitely lead to some consequences.
yeah, it's really interesting. So I have a really good friend, and he's kind of part of one of these places right now. So he was looking for his first job in cyber, and he found it at this place. And he went there, and he's taken my courses before. I'm mentoring him, right? And so he knows what a good test is, what hardcore testing is. Um, and so he's working at this place, and then he's slowly starting to realize that they're just like, no, 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 don't do all this extra stuff. Just scan it with Nessus, and we'll put it into our internal script, and it will rewrite it in our report template, and then we'll just move on to the next test. And like he's really frustrated right now because like he wants to be a good tester, right? A good pen tester, and he knows how to do more and better. And when he goes outside of what his bosses tell him right now, and does like a full methodology, where maybe he's using some additional tools, and then he's doing some manual testing, and then he's doing like more hardcore web app testing as part of like a internal pen test. He destroys like the previous year's test. Like he finds double the findings, more criticals. He feels like he's providing more value, but the shop he works for is kind of like now just like scan with Nessus and burp and be done with it.
That's sad. That's very
It
sad
is
to
sad.
to
It is
hear
It
that.
very
is it is super sad. It is super sad. I mean, he's looking for a new job right now, so yeah.
That's
Is
good.
there any like legal trouble that those companies can get involved in because they're like selling almost false information? Is that like a thing that's happening or?
Well, the thing is in our industry, it's not well defined as what like a good methodology is for pen testing, right? So like if you say that you're going to do something and you do it in an automated way, I mean, still you're accomplishing that. And so maybe not there. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, then yes, there's legal issues you can get into. Um, but so many clients they don't know anything about pen testing, right? Like they get on the call with the salesperson's like, they're selling the hacker. They're like, oh yeah, we've got like some really great hackers on our team, and like we've got a great methodology, and then they don't talk about what that is. And then so it's like, okay, so like they didn't agree to do, or they're not doing anything they didn't agree to do. They were sold on a dream. And so, when you're choosing pen test services as a client, it's really important to understand what the methodology is of the testers. Like, are they following, the OWASP top 10 for the web stuff? Are they following like NIST guidelines for pen testing? There's better methodologies out there, like the PTES, which is the pen test execution framework. It's a little old now, but it's still pretty good. Are they are they forcing their web testers to follow the ASVS, which is the Application Security Verification Standard? I mean, then when you get into those kinds of things and you're like, oh, I want you guys to make sure you cover all this, then if they don't do it, then for sure, you can get into some trouble. Yeah.
There needs to be an honor system though. Like at some point, there's a difference between, you know, efficiency, because we all love efficiency in this field. Automation is great,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
it's like, under delivering and poor performance is also not really an excuse of, um,
Yeah.
because maybe you do have some next gen tools, or you've just got some good stuff and your hackers are quick, and you have automation and your pen test goes smoothly. Like, that's one thing, but I feel like just essentially a bare bones vulnerability scan and then selling it is not much pen test there, more just scan.
Nope. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely what you want to fall away from. I think there's also other parts of the conversation is like some clients are not looking for their pen tester to find stuff, right? And so they're perfectly fine with them scanning with Nessus, finding some low quality stuff, and that being the end of the engagement, right? That some customers like that exist, and they're happy to pay for that kind of service. But I mean, the thing that happens with those companies is normally they're happy to do that and it's a form of deflection for a long time until they get really breached by an adversary. And then they're like, "Oh crap, we should have done better testing." And they know it. They'll never say it, but they know it in their heart, and then they'll start engaging with better pen testing companies.
Yeah, I mean the blue team's like, oh, just a vulnerability scan, that's fine. Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
have to patch much, and then you get
Yeah.
that breach.
As opposing to hiring like someone like us or another great outfit like Trusted Tech or something like that. I mean, we're gonna come in and we're gonna show you bad stuff, right? And we're not mean about it, but like, I'd rather you know than not know. Like, like that's the point of our job.
That is wild. A company with purposefully poor security posture, or not purpose, but just laziness, in the back of their mind, they know they're not really fixing anything, and it doesn't really matter, and it's not brought up until a massive breach happens, and then they lose all integrity. Is there a common cybersecurity myth or offensive security, wherever you want to answer this, that you'd like to, just a myth that you'd like to debunk for everyone out there listening?
I think one of the myths about offensive security in general is that you're gonna spend all this time hacking on cool stuff, and really like 50% of your job is presenting and reporting. And that's not what a lot of people like go into the job thinking they're going to do a lot of. And then they're not prepared or they don't like that part of the job. And then so they don't end up liking consulting because offensive security is consulting usually. You'll have two types of roles that you can fall into as offensive security. You can be a pen tester that works for a consultancy, and then they just farm you out on test after test after test. And so you have to do the opening calls, the closing calls. Sometimes you build a PowerPoint, and then you have to build a report. It's a lot of writing and communication skills. And then the other type of offensive security person is one that works for an organization as part of they work for that organization, they'll be testing that organization. And there is the same thing. You'll have reports, you'll have meetings you have to have with developers and business stakeholders and all this stuff. And so that's one of the things that not a lot of people who get into this job think that they'll be doing, but you do a lot of 50% or more, I would say, is that stuff.
And honestly, the more and more I do in offensive security, I realize that although it is really fun, it's not all dark room, glasses on with a red screen, and, you're just sitting there slamming on your keyboard. There's a lot of the times where, I don't have as much experience as you do, but I'm sure you could relate to this as, you find something, you get a shell. That's fun. That's definitely fun. But there's also a lot of the time where you're just looking and running scans
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
waiting 40 minutes for an nmap scan because you put the wrong parameters. There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that you run into
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's not always like the fun and heart racing stuff that you kind of think about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple memes out there, right, that capture it really well. It's like what people think hacking is just like you've got a ski mask on and you're just like breaking into stuff, and then what hacking actually is, where you're just like staring at a screen for a long time until you're like, oh, will this work? Nope. Oh, will this work? Nope. Oh, will this work? Nope. And then after 50 of those, you're like, oh, this works. Oh, hey, that works. Cool. Like, and it is a form of, I mean, offensive security, at least in the web world and web security, and sometimes network security is, I mean, it's a fancy form of QA, right? And nobody tells people that, right? Like it's like offensive security testing is going through a whole bunch of like A/B tests and like and like fancy security checks, but it requires you to run scans, wait for scans to finish, manual test from a list of like payloads that maybe you have saved in your notes somewhere, like make sure like all your tools are interoperating with each other. Like, and then figuring out how to bypass some security control, which could take you hours of research, is like, how do I get past this stupid filter? Or how do I get past this cloud WAF or whatever? And like, nobody talks about that until like you're in the job, and then you're commiserating with your other red teamers or pen testers, right? And you guys are like, oh my god, this sucks. This nmap scan is taking forever. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely feel that pain for sure.
But what's your top 3 favorite hacking tools? I mean, what do you love using the most?
I'm actually a really big tool guy. I benchmark, I write, and I talk a lot about the efficacy of different hacker tools and the open source community around them. So this answer changes all the time, because I'll be benchmarking and I'll think like one thing is better than another at one point or whatever. But Actually, I have one more for the previous question, then we'll move on to the tools question.
Okay,
I have one more for the previous question. So, so you asked, like, what is one of the misnomers about hacking, or like a myth or whatever, and like that. And so I know this because I've worked at BugCrowd as I was the head of triage at BugCrowd. So hundreds of thousands of security vulnerabilities from some of the best hackers in the world were coming through the platform, and my team was responsible for replicating them, making sure that they provide an impact. That's what a triager does at a bug bounty platform. So I ran the triage team for 3 years at BugCrowd. I've been part of triage teams when I've been a leader at other companies setting up the bug bounty. And one thing that I think is a little disappointing to hackers, I think a lot of times, is how important content discovery is in web hacking. And if you get into offensive security and you get into web hacking, one of the things that people are going to tell you to do is to brute force a list of potentially valid paths for the web server. And this does not seem like a sexy thing to do. Like, you're running a brute force tool, it can take just as long, if not longer, than something like your port scan, right? Like old school tools to do this were like Durbuster and tools like that. Now there are newer school tools to do this job, and they can go infinitely faster. But it's just sending a whole bunch of web requests at a wall, hoping you'll find something. And what happens is, when you see all of these people on Twitter talking about their $1 million hacking, year, and their bugs and stuff like that, a lot of them, are really good, and they have like cool methodologies and stuff like that. But some of the ones I know, some of the $1 million hackers I know who are on the bug bounty platforms, what they don't talk about is how they find the bug. They'll tell a really cool story about how they exploited some cool bug, and that's what they kind of publicize. But then on the back end, you ask them how they found that endpoint, that they found the bug on, and it was directory brute forcing. And so it's something I talk about in my offensive course all the time, is that in my career, and knowing the $1 million hackers, and some of them being my best friends, content discovery, directory brute forcing is absolutely intensely important inside of web testing. Like, unless you have a gray box test where you can see all of the applications running, you can see all the routes and paths, like you have source code, you have to do content discovery. And there's different methods of content discovery. And yeah, and so, like, it's not a sexy part of offensive security, but it leads to really good things. So yeah, that's one misnomer I think that a lot of people have, is like, these people just fall on those bugs, and it's like, no, they found that place that had the bug via this really unsexy method of web testing.
Yeah, and they don't want to tell you. They don't want to say, I just sat looking at my screen for an hour and a half while GoBuster ran and
Yeah,
found
exactly.
like, they don't want to tell you that.
They don't want they don't want to tell you that part at all. No, they don't. Yeah, so
And
that's one. And so sorry.
If you remember anything from any of the other questions, because I know, like, this happens to me, I'll just say something and I'll remember, like, light bulb in my head. Go back, answer whatever you want. This is you. However you want to do it. We don't care.
Oh, no, it's all good. I mean, that was just one I knew that.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I tell that story in my classes a lot. Like, like, I don't want to put them on blast or anything like that, but there's at least like 3 or 4 or 5 bug bounty hunters, who are $1 million hackers on the HackerOne platform or on BugCrowd, who talk about, who make it seem like they're just wizards and they know exactly where to look and like whatever. And it's like, no, dude, you ran GoBuster or FUF on that site, and then you found some weird ass technology that they had integrated, and then yes, you were a wizard and you hacked that thing, but like, you didn't talk about the first part, which is like the unsexy part, because you didn't want people to think you were a script kiddie or something like that. So yeah, I think it's hilarious. As far as the tools go, I think I think obviously burp, right? You got to be highly proficient in an interception proxy, and there's burp right now, and then an incumbent, which is called Kaido, which is also really starting to come out there. But an interception proxy, as far as like multiple technologies, is going to be really important, whether you're testing mobile or web or like, not network. You're probably still in the HPIP stack there, but like, you're probably gonna run into needing to use an interception proxy. So burp has never gone away in my suggestion for like tools to learn. I think that as a group, all of the project discovery tools. So project discovery is an outfit that makes open source tools for hackers, and they have like premium versions of and then cloud hosted versions of all their stuff, but most of their stuff is open source. You go look at project discovery, all their tools are probably some of the best in the open source space right now. So HTTPX is a tool that they write that will help you verify from a lot of recon data which ones have web servers up. It'll do a whole bunch of other stuff too. It'll do screenshots. It'll do all kinds of stuff. So it's like a helper tool. Nuclei we talked about, which is an open source vulnerability scanner. Nabu, which is a faster point scanner than Nmap, and you can extend it into Nmap with certain flags to do certain things. I talk about that. Um, they have a ton of tools in their tool set. So be watching project discovery and the stuff they're building. And then let's see what else is just like. I mean, just be comfortable on the Linux command line, I think, or the Nix command line. Like, I think that being able to bash script is one of the core kind of skill sets that you need to have as an offensive security person, because there's always going to be a time where there's going to be a couple of cutting edge tools that are coming out that you want to use and add to your methodology, but they don't quite work well with other things, or their output's not great. So, just knowing how to use grep, use awk, pipe different tools together and work with their output. JQ is a JSON parsing library on the command line, or JQ is a JSON parsing tool on the command line that you can learn to use to parse JSON data. Just being comfortable on the Linux command line has always been a force multiplier for me, because you can script up things really, really quickly.
AI actually helped from me, like starting out. If I need a PowerShell script or a Bash script or something like that, and there's something I'm forgetting, that's actually one of the ways that I've definitely used AI in my career in cybersecurity, is just looking up what is a ping scan or ping sweep for Bash scripting. If you don't already have that in copy and paste and you don't really want to type it out, there's definitely good ways of. That's just some way I've
Yeah.
used AI personally.
Yeah. I mean, PowerShell would be a close second to Bash scripting, I think, because a lot of internal Windows assessments and stuff like that are, require you to use some frameworks that are heavy PowerShell usage. But yeah, I mean, it has become infinitely easier with ChatGPT and AI to script. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at Anthropic's Claude 3.30 or whatever, their new one, or 3.5, but it is the most fantastic coding buddy that you could ask for. I mean, yeah, it is just fantastic. I run my Arcanum cybersecurity bot in one tab, and then a Claude 3.5 just general conversation in another tab, and those are always open when I'm testing right now, just to ask questions like that. Like, hey, I need a quick script to do this thing. Can you build it for me?
That's awesome.
And it is so good right now. Yeah.
You can even have commands that but there's like parameters you forget, and that's something that's helped me. Like or specific, there's specific languages that I've ran into where it's just I'm kind of like I'm at command line and I'm on an SQL server and I forget how to list the tables and it definitely helps me in my just day-to-day work. That's quicker than Google, and it gives me specific answers.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's such a God. I wish I had it when I first started testing. Right, like it's helping me test now, but I wish when I was such a noob in the beginning that I would have had it to just ask dumb questions too. And that's what I tell people to be okay with. Like, grab Arcanum Security Bot, or grab a subscription to Anthropic's Sonnet, or whatever you want to do. Like grab grab access to it and just ask it dumb questions, like, because that's what it's there for. No one gets to see the answers, right? Like, I mean, like you said, like SQL syntax of an obscure type of DBMS, right? Like, I don't know Oracle, right? Like, and I could probably go read a book and find out the syntax, or I could just ask AI and be like, here's what I'm trying to do. This DBMS is like Oracle. Can you help me? And you're done in like 2 seconds. So
yeah. I mean, if you're ever shamed for using Google or ChatGPT or something like that, they're probably not in the field. They got to be bluffing.
Oh yeah,
I'm a proud Google dorker.
So. Oh yeah, 100%. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's another thing I said at a conference really recently. It's like all this generative AI stuff. It is just the new skill set that was like Google hacking, right? Like using Google search operators, being better at asking questions to Google. Like that's still a core skill set, but the one that's very adjacent to it is learning how to use AI to do some of this stuff. And so, I think it will be a core skill set for a while.
So, like, what do you recommend to individuals who are like just starting out? Like, they know about cybersecurity, they are in classes, but like, what's like some of the questions like you wish you knew when you started out, kind of thing.
And I think it is knowing that it's kind of some of the stuff we've already talked about. So
Hmm.
knowing that there's a lot of options inside of cybersecurity. It's not just the couple of things you've been taught in college. Like my cousin just came out of a full university course, and it was like CS was most of the cyber degree. So she learned how to do some coding, do some DBMS stuff, do a little bit of cloud stuff, and then her electives were mostly the security content. And so she chose forensics and she chose ethical hacking. And really, she only had to do like 4 electives or something like that. I think there was a core one which was like crypto, and I remember what the other one was. But that's such a small section of what you can do in the industry. So when she got out, she was like, "Cool, I want to do this. Like, I want to do this cyber thing." And I was like, "Oh, so like, do you like forensics?" And she's like, "It's like all right." And I was like, "Do you like offensive security? If you want to be like a pen tester?" And she's like, "Yeah, I mean that would be like a good one." And I was like, "Well, there's also all these other things." And we started talking about it over, like a glass of wine, and it was like, she's like, I had no idea there were all these other jobs. And so like I wish someone would have sat me down and been like here's everything. Like here's the gamut of what you can choose to do. You can specialize right away if you want. You don't have to go through some trial by fire in another thing you don't enjoy. Like so I think if someone would have told me that, um, I think that would have been nice. Um, I also think that earlier in my career, I did it and I was lucky, but brand building and network is 50% of your success in this career, I would say. Whatever cyber you're doing. And it is going to conferences. It is going to meetups in your local town. It is, listening to podcasts. It is being more engaged in this job than just the 9 to 5. And then also like creating a voice for yourself. Like, most of my jobs since the beginning, because back in the day I blogged and I'm on Twitter and I'm talking about like, hey, I'm using this new tool to do this thing and I like it more than this one because of X, Y, and Z reason. Or I took this training and I really, here like is my review of it or whatever. Like starting to build a brand um, at the beginning of your career is really important because many of my jobs have been handed to me because of my people know my brand, right? And so it wouldn't be something I'd have to go back and tell myself because I was smart enough to do it, but other people I would tell them at the beginning of your career, like work on your brand, like make sure you're blogging, make sure you're meeting people at conferences or local meetups or bar meetups for security or whatever. And if you're antisocial, write a lot of content just in your room about review security tools, do a podcast, like you guys are doing, like it all adds up into, like I said, that portfolio, and it makes finding jobs infinitely easier when people know who you are instead of you're just some rando submitting a resume on top of a pile. I guess those are some of the things I would say.
I'm glad you brought up like staying up to date. I mean, you did mention there's a bunch of ways to stay up to date, but how are you going to get that job that you're wanting to go for if you had your skill set 5 years ago? Or I mean, shoot, you could have a different skill set than you do today than you do tomorrow because of a crazy 0 day that comes out or something. There's all these different resources you can pick from, but you just got to do it. You just got to stay on top of it because it's so like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's
What the
changing all the
career is
time.
now. I mean, the cybersecurity wasn't really a career not too long ago. It's pretty technically a new career.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's hard, right? I know that not everybody wants to work 60 hours a week, right? To put in that extra work, and I don't want to be one of those people that says that that's necessary, right? I think there's ways that you can fit it into your work day, still stay current and stuff like that. But I will be honest and say that I mean, like until I was like 30, right? From my 20s to my 30s, I was trying to establish myself, I was putting in 60-hour weeks where I was putting in extra 20 hours of work into research, and it sucked. But I was young and I had that time, and it paid off. Like, and most of it went into that brand building part and researching part and speaking at conferences part, and it paid dividends. And so I know there's this cross section of younger people right now too who are like, can I just have a job that's an 8 to 5 and enjoy the rest of my life? And the answer is yes, you can do that. But if you want to be at the upper echelon of this field because it changed so fast, like you need to ask your question. You need to ask the question of yourself, like, okay, it might take a little bit of effort, a little extra effort, an extra hour of research a day or something like that to make sure that you're more employable than the next person in line. And I know that sucks to say, but it really has been a pivotal part of my role. Like even for my classes, right? I'm putting an extra 2 hours a day to research cutting edge tools, methodology, tips, and tricks to put in both the hacking and the AI course. And I'm doing bug bounties on my side. And I just, I sacrifice my video game time to do that research sometimes. But yeah.
And how do you, because that's a lot to do at a single time, and you have to definitely love what you're doing to continue doing that. How would you say you deal with, burnout or fatigue, mental fatigue? Because a lot of it,
Yeah.
it is a lot and it is a demanding field.
Yeah, I think you have to love the field. I think this happens anywhere. I think that um like if you love what you do, you're really, I mean, let's take it to a different area. Like I have a friend, he's one of my good friends. He's a mechanical engineer. He loves that shit. He loves doing mechanical engineer stuff. He loves it. And so like he's always reading white papers and like going to conferences and stuff like that for his field, and to like get better and understand new things. And just so happens that he went to this one talk by this one person at a con and had some beers with them and like talked about some stuff. And then this opportunity came up for a project at his work. I try not to dock them. And they were like, "Oh, I wonder if we could do this process better." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I went to a conference where I talked with the dude about this process, and I read his white paper, and it's like I think that we probably could have a better process to engineer these parts." And then he became the director of engineering in like within a year because he was like the guy who put in the extra time and built them a whole new engineering process for like building these parts, right? And it's the same thing in our field too. It's like you can put in the time and you put in the research, like you're gonna go far. But if you don't need to be a director, that's cool. Like you can just do the 9 to 5 security job and be totally fine. How do you avoid burnout? I don't really have a great answer to that, right? Like I am a very roller coastery person. For instance, I just finished 4 days of teaching in a row and last week for my offensive security class, and I put so much of my heart and soul into teaching that class. And you have to be on for 4 days teaching students, answering questions, running labs. Um, when I'm done with that, like I need no one to talk to me for like 3 or 4 days, like and and so it is this micro form of burnout, and I just kind of build that into my workflow. And it's like I know, like, hey, I'm going to be useless after this thing. Now that is a very focus thing. If you're just getting burned out by putting in the extra research effort, um, like I don't really have a great answer for that. I'm not like a psychologist, psychiatrist, or anything like that. I think I've had burnout just being a consultant before. Um, Usually addressed by taking a little bit of time off or switching the type of project I'm working on or something like that. A lot of times you'll get burnt out in this industry because you're a pen tester or something, and you just do the same thing. Like they keep handing you web app pen tests, and you've just been doing web app pen tests for like 6 or 8 months nonstop, and you're just like, I need to change. And so like some places will be cool enough to say like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we're gonna move you over to the network team for a little while, and you can help them. Or we need tools development, so you're gonna help us develop some tools. Or mobile testing is a new thing. Do you want to like try to do some of that? And I think those opportunities have helped me stay more engaged and less burnt out sometimes, but not a ton of great answers there, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely hard to answer that for sure. And I have this almost sense of burnout and mental fatigue after like putting in a lot of hours to a specific thing. But then it's like like you said, after a couple days or something like that, I'm back on it and I'm looking at something different or the same thing. So it's like almost micro doses of burnout here and there, but
Yeah.
then I'm never like really just, giving up on something.
I think a lot of people in this industry and what attracts them to cyber is because they have like mild forms of ADHD, which I have, right? And so
Yeah.
because it's so new and everything's like shiny all the time, like you can be learning a lot of new stuff. It's such a cool career for people like me. And like I think I think that's good, right? Because I think a lot of the creativeness is around um, you know, tools that get created, exploits that get found. They get found by, maybe not the standard creative person, but a very technically like IT creative person, and that lends itself to kind of being, the ADHDer who's just going to go down that rabbit hole for like 12 hours and like research something and then disappear for like, like another 12 hours. And I think that I tell this to a lot of cybersecurity managers is that especially people who are going to manage red teamers. It's like expect roller coaster, right? Like expect a roller coaster type of contributor where other managers don't like that. Other managers don't like the roller coaster type contributor. And the roller coaster type of contributor is like, okay, so like Nate, you're a pen tester, or, you're doing whatever in your job, and if I classify you as a roller coaster type contributor, similar to what people have called me before, is like, okay, so we know Nate at the top of his roller coaster is contributing to our organization at like 150, 200% of any normal employee, right? He's doing extra research. He's, building stuff for us. He's, helping improve everything and just really, he's putting in a lot of time. And then we know that Nate eventually will get burned out and be at the bottom portion of that roller coaster. But even at the bottom portion of Nate's roller coaster, he's like 100% of anyone else, right? So like even at the bottom portion, you're still probably doing pretty good if you're that passionate about the subject. And so, um, you can address those things with management and just be like, yeah, cool. So this is how they operate. And then also like if you put them on a hardcore project and burnout happens, like give them, like a few extra days off of flex time or something like that, or try to mitigate in certain ways. And with that, both knowing and that, like kind of PTO structure and understanding how hackers work, you can manage hackers really effectively to be, pretty awesome contributors to an organization. I don't know if that helps at all. So
I've had countless projects where I will deep dive hours and hours into something, and then the next day I will have there'll be something else that I'm just passionate about doing, and a week later I'll come back to it and I'll go back
yeah,
in.
Final question is, if you want to shout anything out, I guess it's not really a question, but a statement. If you want to shout anything out, upcoming classes or trainings or anything, you can go ahead and do that right now if you want.
yeah. So like I said, we'll be at DEF CON. If anybody is at DEF CON, come find me. I'll be tweeting, about where I am and stuff like that. We have a training in September on AI, which is called Red, Blue, Purple AI. It is the 2-day training of the talk that I've been giving around the conference scene. Even from the version you guys saw at HackSpaceCon, it has been significantly enhanced. I think this is one of the best courses I've ever made. It is pretty expensive, but if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's in September. I teach it once a quarter. Um, and then other than that, we'll be all over the world. So we're going to Montreal for B-Sides Montreal. We'll be at Denver OWASP. We'll be at Houston Security Conference. We'll be in San Francisco for the Global OWASP meeting, and then we'll be in Southern California for Pacific Hackers Con. And then the next hacking training is in October. We haven't set the date yet, so that's kind of our general calendar. But feel free to engage. My Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, is at Jhaddix, and the company is Arcanum Information Security, so you can find us on Google. And yeah, that's about it.
And we will have everything that we can, the things mentioned, as well as Arcanum and X. I have a trouble saying X because I've said Twitter for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll have all that linked to and make sure that to all you out there listening that you can go and find this with ease and efficiency, as all the hackers like. So
Cool. Very cool.
That's a wrap on today's episode from Cyber Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed Jason's takes as much as we have, and a special thanks to Jason for joining us on this episode.
Make sure to check the description for Jason's links and join our Discord for more information on topics covered. Don't forget to leave a comment or contact us through our socials if you have any questions or suggestions about future episodes.
Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep embracing the future. Cyber Chronicles, signing off.